Today's topic is concord. We are going to talk about the agreement between verbs and subjects. And you might ask, why bother? Why is this so important? Well, even your own book states that you can dramatically improve your written and spoken English if you manage to get rid of concord errors. And if your paper sometimes came back looking like this, you probably know that this might actually be an important point. So what is concord? Concord is a grammatical agreement between the subject and the verb. So not any kind of agreement, but a grammatical agreement. And to be able to talk about grammatical agreement, we first have to look at grammatical features. You can say that content words are like Lego. You start with one block, which is called the stem, and then you add on other things to build what you need. And in the end, you have a lovely Lego figure. So if you have the word work, which is the stem, you can make works, or working, or worked, or worker, or workable. Some of these blocks make new words. For example, worker, which is made out of work, someone who does work. And other blocks add grammatical features, such as agreement marker. When we look at verbs, we will find out that verbs mark person and number. I'm sure you have seen a table like this before. We have the same stem work, and we see that in the first person singular, it's I work, you work, and then in the third person, we have he, she, or it works. You can see the S there, the agreement marker. And you can notice that it's in all persons and numbers, it's just 0, there is nothing visible, and in the third person singular, there is an S. You might have been told that the English language only marks agreement in the third person singular. But the truth is actually that it marks it everywhere, except that you cannot see it because the marker is 0. Other languages, for example Norwegian, do the same thing. And if you think that Norwegian doesn't have agreement, it's not exactly the full picture. You can see that in Norwegian, the ending is the same in each person. So you have jeg jobber, du jobber, vi jobber. You cannot see any difference because it's always just are. In other languages, for example Spanish, the situation is very different. You have the stem trabajar, and the endings are different in every single person. Yo trabajo, nos trabajamos. If you look at German, you see the very same thing again. The endings are different in each person and number. You have the stem to work, Arbeit, or the stem is only Arbeit, and then you have different endings. Ich arbeite, wir arbeiten. And it's the same, for example, in French, but I do not speak French, so I cannot help you there. Verbs can also mark tense and aspect, but we are not going to work with this here. If you decide to study English at the university level, you will definitely hear more about this. Now, when we look at nouns, it is a little bit simpler because there is only number. Nouns in English do not mark person. So we have cat, cats, box, boxes, and then we have some strange nouns which make strange plurals. For example, sheep, where the plural is sheep, or water, which has no plural whatsoever. We will get back to this in the following video. Nouns can also mark gender and case, but again, as with verbs, you will hear more about this if you decide to study English at the university. Now, when we are talking about concord or agreement, you have already seen that concord is a grammatical agreement between the subject and the verb. And now we'll look more closely on what the subject and the verb are. Before we were talking about verbs and nouns, now it's all of a sudden the subject. And there is a good reason for that. Verbs mark person and number, but here we have to be aware that modal verbs, for example, can, could, should, may, must, and so on, do not show agreement, so you will never have coulds or mays. It will always be in the form you have learned. But now we are going to look more closely at subjects, because subjects and nouns do not necessarily have to be the same thing. The simple definition of a subject is that it is the doer of the action expressed by the verb. So if we have Peter drives a car, Peter is the one doing the driving. They usually come late, they are the one usually coming late. But that's not completely correct. The more correct definition would be that subject is the phrase or the clause with which the main verb agrees in person and number. This might sound quite complicated, but it's the same thing again which we already talked about. Subject is the phrase which the main verb agrees with in person and number. So if we look at the examples down there, nothing has been done. Nothing is not really doing anything. It's not the performer of the action, but it is nevertheless the subject of the sentence. Nothing agrees with the verb has. Nothing is singular. Has is singular. Her dramatic entrances always amaze me. Here again, we see that her dramatic entrances, the entire phrase, agrees with the verb amaze. We can see that because entrances are in plural and amaze is also in plural. So what if the subject is not just a noun? How can you tell whether it is plural or singular? And here the pronouns come to the rescue. If you have a sentence, for example, that he lied to me is very sad, you can replace this whole phrase, this whole clause by the pronoun it. And then you will have it is very sad. You see that it is singular, the verb also has to be singular. Some schools in our district require that. Again, some schools in our district, they require that. Peter and I are going out tomorrow. Peter and I are we. We are going out tomorrow. Plural and plural verb. People need to be more careful. Here again, we can replace people by the pronoun they, and we see they need to be more careful. They is a plural. It needs a plural verb need. And now we are going to look at some exercises to see if you can do this correctly.